The cabin door slammed shut right in front of Rachel Morgan. Inside, laughter echoed freely, completely unrestrained. Outside, icy wind lashed against her face as a blanket of white snow covered the mountainside. For the first few seconds, Rachel thought it was simply a misunderstanding. Then she saw Daniel and his 2 younger brothers standing behind the window. They were laughing. Kyle had even raised his phone to record the moment. Brandon patted his brother on the shoulder as if he had just witnessed something incredibly entertaining. Rachel knocked on the door again. No one opened it. 14 years of marriage suddenly felt painfully unfamiliar. This winter getaway had been planned by Daniel weeks earlier. He had said it would be an opportunity for the entire family to grow closer after a busy year. Rachel had tried to believe him, even though for years she had been the target of jokes at family gatherings, even though the sarcastic remarks had never stopped, even though every time she felt hurt, Daniel insisted that it was simply his family's way of showing affection. Inside the cabin, the music continued to play. Outside, Rachel's hands began to tremble from the cold. What nobody knew was that the woman being treated like an outsider was actually the person who had quietly saved Daniel's family from financial disaster for years. The investments Daniel was always so proud of, the times his company managed to survive difficult periods, the business opportunities that seemed to appear at exactly the right moment. Rachel had never told anyone about the role she had played behind it all. She chose silence. She chose to protect her husband's pride. But that night, as she watched the 3 men laughing together behind the warmth of the glass, a completely different feeling began to emerge. Not anger, not heartbreak, awakening. For the first time in many years, Rachel realized that perhaps the most frightening thing was not being left outside in the freezing snow. It was the fact that she had spent far too many years staying in a place that had never truly considered her family. The next morning, after the storm had finally eased, Rachel returned to the cabin. There was no apology waiting for her. Instead, Daniel and his brothers were still retelling the events of the previous night as if they were sharing a memorable joke. Kyle played the video he had recorded. Laughter once again filled the room. Daniel even told Rachel that she needed to learn how to relax and stop taking everything so seriously. This time Rachel did not argue. She simply watched. She watched the men she had spent more than a decade loving, supporting, and protecting. 1 month after the trip, she filed for divorce. Daniel laughed when he received the papers. He believed it was just an emotional reaction. He believed Rachel would come back, just as she always had before. But during the division of assets, secrets began to surface. Financial records were opened one by one. Hidden loans were uncovered. For years, Daniel had quietly guaranteed debts for his 2 younger brothers. Several shared assets had been used as collateral without Rachel's knowledge. The woman whom the entire family had always viewed as naive and dependent was the first to realize that their entire financial structure was standing on the edge of collapse. Then another truth emerged. Daniel's construction company had not grown because of his talent alone, as everyone believed. For years, Rachel had quietly used her management experience and professional network to connect clients, resolve crises, and save critical contracts. She never took credit. She never demanded recognition. But now, she had no reason to keep hiding the truth. On the day the divorce was finalized, Daniel still believed he was the one walking away victorious. What he did not realize was that the only person who had been keeping his life stable had chosen to leave forever. And for the first time in many years, Rachel did not look back. Nearly 2 years after the divorce, Rachel Morgan sat in her new office, gazing out at the endless green mountain ranges stretching across the horizon. Her life was completely different now. The ecotourism company she had joined in its early days had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. Rachel was no longer the woman who constantly sought validation from others. She had become a leader trusted by her employees and respected by her business partners. Then one afternoon, her assistant stepped into the office. A man was asking to see her. He had returned several times over the past few weeks. His name was Daniel Morgan. Rachel remained silent for a few seconds. When the door opened, the man who walked in was almost unrecognizable. Daniel had aged considerably. The shoulders that once carried so much confidence now sagged under the weight of exhaustion. In his hands was a thick folder. Inside were letters and messages that had never received a reply. Daniel explained that after Rachel left, everything had begun to fall apart. The company lost clients. The debts continued to grow. Kyle and Brandon, once the closest of brothers, had become rivals locked in long and bitter financial disputes. The family he had always placed above everything else had fallen apart. For the first time in his life, Daniel was forced to take an honest look at himself. He finally understood that the night of the snowstorm had never been a joke. It was the moment he betrayed the one person who had always stood by his side. At last, Daniel lifted his head and looked at Rachel. He asked for a chance to start over. The room fell silent. Rachel offered a gentle smile. There was no resentment left. No pain. Only peace. She thanked Daniel for his apology. Then she quietly told him that forgiveness does not always mean returning. The woman who had once stood alone in that snowstorm no longer existed. Daniel nodded softly. Perhaps he understood that better than anyone. When the door closed behind him, Rachel looked out toward the open sky ahead. For the first time, she was truly grateful for the worst day of her life. Because sometimes what feels like a loss is actually the path that leads us to the best version of ourselves. If you were Rachel, would you give Daniel a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful and emotional stories.